Welcome back, history seekers, for another episode of Fistory. Tonight, we will be looking at one of the strangest episodes from the 16th century sort of European unpleasantness, of which there was a lot. The consequences of the Reformation were ravaging across Europe. This led to like a whole bunch of laws. The pushback against the Catholic Church resulted in an explosion of alternate views of Christianity, and every sort of single little thing from like how to do the Eucharist to like how to like have your like church done to like the meaning of baptism got relitigated, and in many cases led to like actual wars. Now, one of the strangest episodes of this period was the Anabaptist Rebellion in Münster. Münster is a town in Germany. Wait a second, hang on, just let me get the page up. Where is it? Oh, come on. How do I not have this? Oh, that's right. It's because Wikipedia has got like the page. Wait, here. Wait, where is it? Ah, come on. Well, that's not a good start. Hang on a second. Rebellion of Munster. Right, here we go. Sorry about that. The Münster Rebellion, the German Tauferreich von Münster, the Anabaptist domination of Münster, was an attempt by radical Anabaptists to establish a communal sectarian government in the German city of Münster, then under the large Prince Bishopric of Münster in the Holy Roman Empire. This happened in about 1534. And one of the reasons why this is such an interesting period of history is that it is sort of one of the sort of first cases of what would be recognized now as a communist dictatorship, essentially. And as far as I can tell, it was the Christians that did it. There doesn't seem to be any Moorish involvement in this. So that, the next time someone says that it's impossible to have this kind of like stuff go on without Levantine fuckery, you can point to this. This seems like very much a Christian invention. Now, this all basically happened because of the Anabaptists. The Anabaptists were a sort of like weird kind of extreme Protestant sect, not to say that they were all extreme. There are sort of modern versions of Anabaptism that have calmed down significantly. But back in the day, they were sort of caught up with this idea of free will, the primary idea being that Christ had to be chosen as a sort of conscious decision by adults. They were against infant baptism, and the reason they were against infant baptism was because of the idea, as I said, you had to make a choice. Now, of course, in Catholicism and also in the Orthodox Church, you had infant baptisms, and this sort of led also to this idea of sort of like free will. And in the extreme sort of sense, you got all these like weird antinomian ideas start to like drift in. Antinomianism is the idea that the way to get to God is through sinning. Now, most people understand antinomianism in modern times through groups like the Frankists or the Sabbateans, but it's not exclusively to like one religion. People can just up and say, hey, I've got this really, really great idea. What if, the way to get to God is by ignoring like tradition and laws, and you get these weird sort of like almost iconoclastic paroxysms, essentially, that take over in a sort of like weird sort of like mass psychosis. And what happened in Münster is definitely, in my opinion, a form of mass psychosis. Interestingly enough, this is one of the sort of main ideas in authors like Vogelin and Shafarevich, for the idea that socialism is sort of a long-running theme through medieval Europe that breaks out every so often. You have things like the Münster Rebellion, the Levelers, these other sort of proto-socialist groups that break out in sort of the 1600s. And then they sort of like make an argument that, therefore sort of communism is a sort of extension of this idea. Now, I got a bunch of... I found this book. I didn't manage to get through the whole thing. I originally thought this would be just like a very, very simple thing to cover. But it turns out that actually reading this entire book in like 2 hours was hard to do, but I managed to get through most of it. So we will have a look. After the German Peasants' War, 1524 to 1525, a forceful attempt to establish a theocracy was made at Münster in Westphalia. Westphalia is a very, very important sort of place. It would come to, it would sort of collapse into, with Bohemia around it, in the 30 Years' War, which was an incredibly destructive war, and would eventually result in what is known as the Treaty of Westphalia, which is what underlies the modern nation state. So basically, just to sort of set this up, the Anabaptists were sort of like looking for a place where they would be unmolested. A lot of this had to do with this guy, Melchior Hoffman. There we go. That's his picture there. Apparently not in any way Jewish, even though like with a name like that, I was like, Melchior Hoffman, you kidding me? But apparently not. I don't know. And basically, the Anabaptists began taking over the city of Münster. They started sort of telling all the other people in the area, most notably the Dutch, come on down. We've got like our own city. There was a big strain of apocalypticism in the Anabaptists as well, which was quite significant. One of the problems with prophecy in religion is that it tends to sort of become political speech in religion, if that makes sense, right? It tends to like plot out this idea for the future. It's useful for social control. And if people believe very, very strongly in a prophecy, and then, you know, that prophecy comes true or seems to come true, you can get incredible political power through this, right? Now, this is an important point when it comes to things like belief in the apocalypse, because occasionally throughout history, I mean, you still get this now, a religious community will be seized essentially by a sort of apocalyptic fervor. They will believe that the world is coming to an end, and because the world is coming to an end, all of these sort of traditions and laws that previously defined their religion will be overturned and ignored. It is often a call for sort of like, a radical reappraisal of social systems and economies and all of this kind of like stuff. The Sabbateans notably had that under Sabbatai Zevi after the Spanish expulsion in like Turkey and Palestine, when the Jews were wandering after the expulsion. And this creates all kinds of like legit batshit stuff going on, right? Now, of course, in 1530s, the consequences of the Reformation were still rolling across Europe. The Catholic Church had been fatally undermined, and it was sort of like a time when it was seen that there were a bunch of different religious experiments that could be done. The printing press had come out, the Vulgate was out, normal people could read the Bible. There was the sort of Lutheran idea of sola scriptura, that only things in the Bible have merit. And in the sort of extreme interpretation, like the Anabaptist interpretation, this meant that basically anything that had been added to Christianity since sort of the reading of the Bible, including things like the liturgy and, the sacraments and all this kind of other stuff, needed to be jettisoned. So it was this fundamental sort of rethinking and very, very retarded sort of like way of being like, we're just going to go back to the scriptures. Of course, many people have pointed out that one of the things about the church and the church fathers, generally speaking, is that just like giving a sort of a bunch of, well, essentially peasants copies of the Bible and saying like, go at it, can have some really, really bad results. And I think this has been sort of borne out by what happened. The church, whether Orthodox or Catholic or whatever, is a sort of structure that sort of stops the worst excesses of heresy, essentially. And when I was a little sprog and I was looking into all this kind of stuff, I remember wondering to myself, well, what's the big deal with heresy anyway, right? Like, why does anyone care? Well, shit like this is why people care, right? So let's just do a little bit on Anabaptism. This is from The Socialist Phenomena by Shafarevich. Oh, I really should put these links in the description. If you want to like read books, I've got to start like doing that. So it's sort of they're quite a dualistic bunch, the Anabaptists, in this sort of like weird way, right? They start out with like murder as a cardinal sin, and so therefore we won't participate in the army or in governments or in wars or any kind of stuff like this. The Amish are actually a descendant of the Anabaptists. But then they get very, very quickly to we have to like exterminate the impious. They get this sort of like very, very militant Puritan thing and sort of the edge of it. Let's see, where are we going here? And because of this idea of you have to choose to be a Christian, you wind up with certain strains of Anabaptism essentially mirroring certain forms of what we would recognize now as sort of leftist liberalism, right? That everything has to have a choice, right? Like everyone has to have a choice to, to be this or to be that. And weirdly enough, of course, it winds up going terribly. This is happening at the same time as the Free Brethren were about. I'll probably do an episode on them as well. They were another sort of antinomian sect that was like common in Bohemia at this time. Bohemia generally, which I think is like Eastern Germany and like parts of the Czech Republic, turned out to be incredibly significant in the sort of the development of Europe during this period. There's a lot of crazy shit happening in Bohemia. So the Free Brethren were classic antinomians. They understood Christian freedom in a carnal sense, for they wished to be free of all laws, presuming that Christ had liberated them. Therefore, they regarded themselves as free of tithe, of the corvée to join the army, and of serfdom. Some of them, desperate libertines, seduced silly women into believing that they could not become spiritual without breaking wedlock. Others believed that if all things must be in common, then wives must also be in common. Still others said that after the new baptism, there had been born anew and could not sin, that only flesh sins. These false teachings were the source of shame and obscenity, yet they dared to teach that such was the will of the Father. There's a bunch of this stuff going around Bohemia. There's all these stories of these like weird sort of like cults popping up where they like have like orgies in caves and very, very eyes wide shut kind of stuff. And if you read some of the modern authors about this, they're just like, oh, obviously that didn't happen. It's just the Christians making stuff up. I have no reason to believe that at all. Sorry, right? Like, I mean, look at all the crap that's going on in modern day, right? Yes, so they say in earnest that no one should have property and that all wealth and patrimony should be in common, as it is impossible to be Christian and wealthy at the same time. They set forth as a new monastic order rules regarding clothing as to the fabric, shape, style, and length. So you see in the late 1400s, the Anabaptists were essentially sort of like underground and conspiratorial because, they were heretics. But around 1520s, they decide to basically come out into the open and enter into an open struggle with the world and the Catholic Church. Now, this has been described by some as Gnosticism. Gnosticism technically is a desire to escape the world, not remake the world. It has more in common with Judaism in that respect. Although because it's also apocalyptic, it's more that like the world is about to sort of be remade by force, by like, the second coming of this or that, or the fulfillment of the book of Revelations or something. In my opinion, a lot of this stuff is essentially excuses for bad behavior and tends to happen in these periods where the sort of underlying rationale for how sort of society and the thought frameworks gets undermined. And people just start listening to like any old crap. And as much as I dislike the way the sort of, the upper classes are like, you shouldn't question that, you'll upend society. They do kind of have a point. And you can look at history like this as a example. Right. So This book, by the way, which is False Prophets and Preachers, Henry Gressback's account of the rebellion in Münster, has some great pictures. Look at that, right? This is the kind of like people that were hanging around in Münster at the time. It's very, it's very German. Yeah, very German. Look at this, man. These awesome like etchings and stuff like that. Gottes Macht ist mein Kraft. Making God is my vocation. So there's this is like the kind of like stuff that they were wearing. I mean, at least originally, okay, right? Like it started getting a little bit like hairy. This is a Landsknecht, which is a sort of like traveling mercenary. These were very, very sort of common during this period of history. You had a lot of like little city states, particularly in Germany. It was like just a patchwork of these little city states. And you had these sort of like mercenary armies going around because it was often hard to raise armies from the local populace. Easier just to hire a bunch of Landsknechts to go and take stuff. Right. So this is the account. I'm just gonna like read a bunch of stuff from this because this is like pretty cool and it gets batshit crazy. Eventually, they all get tortured to death, but that is much, in my opinion, less interesting than the kind of society that they actually set up in the first place. If you understand what I mean. Excuse me. So the Anabaptists like take over. They get on the council. And then they just basically sort of start making a ruckus and demanding that everyone be rebaptized. And anyone who would not be rebaptized was driven from the city. After they had chosen the new council at 7 in the morning on that Friday, they ran through the city up and down the streets shouting, "Get out, you godless people. God's just about to wake up and punish you." They ran like this through the city with their weapons. They threw doors open and then by force chased out of the city everyone who was unwilling to have himself rebaptized. These people had to abandon everything they had, house and home, wife and child, and in this piteous way, they had to depart from their possessions and abandon them. So men and women, maidens and children, and all the clergy withdrew from the city in the morning on a Friday, the second one in Lent. On that Friday, there was savage weather with rain, snow, and strong winds. A dog should not have been chased from the city on that Friday, so savage was the weather. The other burghers and the clergy had left before. If they had waited until that day, they still would have had to leave along with the others. A lot of the burghers, like the high class people, the property owners, had essentially like left earlier, seeing how this was going to go. They had like left to try and get help from the baron, the dude who ran the little statelet, right? This is sort of like the way like shit worked in this period in Germany. You had these like little statelets that had like a baron or a margrave, but the little cities were essentially self-governing because of the tyranny of geography, fundamentally, right? It took a long time to like ride places, so things were more or less like just left to themselves. Once these people moved out of the city, there was a great crying in the city of Münster from the women and children. Those who remained in the city, men, women, and maidens, were forced to the baptizing. So the burghers and women who remained had to go to the marketplace and have themselves baptized. This baptizing lasted about 3 days. Those who had themselves baptized on the Friday went to the houses of the burgomasters. Burgermeister is basically like a mayor. And they each had their name, something. So then John Matthias, who was sort of the head of this, and John of Leyden, who was another head. Basically, you had these sort of people just sort of like rock up, and they'd be like, "I have seen God in a vision," and no. Everything was like in flux, and so these people basically took over. John Matthias and John of Leyden were both prophets and were, along with the burgomasters and the council, the leading men in the city of Münster. The leading prophet in the beginning was John Matthias, and John of Leyden wasn't the leading prophet then, but it was John Matthias who said that it was revealed to him that John of Leyden was to be raised up high in the world and become a great prophet. This is one of the big pitfalls with prophecy in religion. It's always a big, in my opinion, this is actually one of the big weaknesses of Christianity historically, is that if God can speak to people individually, you can get all kinds of like crazy stuff, you know, Joan of Arc and all this kind of other stuff. But at the same time, if you just completely deny any kind of individual revelation, it tends to become very, very top heavy. So it's, you know, you sort of got to balance this kind of like stuff, right? The two prophets had all the menfolk that were in the city gathered together in the cathedral square with their weapons and armor, and they formed ranks 7 deep. They're rolling 7 deep, bros. The prophets then started shouting in the square that the door to mercy was shut. There was no more mercy. Yeah, you see where this is going, right? Rather, God was angered. They shouted that those who'd been baptized on the Friday were to go and stand by themselves on one side. And these people went and stood by themselves. Then some members of the council and preachers came and said to those who were standing by themselves that each one should lay down his weapon and take off his armor. So they laid down their weapons. The members of the council and the preachers also bound the weapons from their bodies and removed their armor by force. Now, basically what you're talking about is a sort of communal struggle session. Essentially, I've just got clips from this book. Maybe I should have like I don't know. Wait, where are we? Where are we at? I don't have a page number. Hang on a second. Also, while I'm just looking at that, please donate to the channel. You can totally do that. Entropy or Ko-Fi. It is Christmas, so you know that would be very, very nice. Page 73. Okay, let's have a look here. 3. This is quite a long book. So I'm just trying to like clip sort of like the best stuff, basically. Here we go. So yeah, so basically they just did this sort of mass struggle session in the middle of the church square. They confiscated weapons and armor from the people who were rebaptized. You know, they baptized them with 3 handfuls of water, you know, without the usual sort of baptismal rites. Preachers baptized in their own houses, some old men and women who could not go to the marketplace, and some who wouldn't go. They baptized some of the old and sick people in this way with good words. Nobody imagines things would turn out as they did. I feel like that should be engraved on like a big plinth and like put somewhere like maybe outside the European Parliament or something. Like, nobody imagines things would turn out the way they did. You know, no one ever does imagine, right, that things are going to turn out the way they did, do they? Right? Like, you know, it's like, oh, this is an awesome idea. This is going to be like great. How could anyone have possibly imagined? Yeah. So yeah, look, you know, when the rebaptizers took control of the city and forced everyone to be baptized, or they had to leave the city and abandon everything they possessed. Those who were baptized on Friday stayed in the city with the same poverty that they had, and they did not imagine that things would go so far. I mean, yeah, right? Like, how could it have gone so far, bros? Now, then the next thing that happened was that they started basically sort of instituting sort of like monetary communism. Money was evil, they said. So they seized all of the gold and silver from everyone, because they're like, you know, trading is unchristian, commerce is unchristian. Give us all the silver and gold. And, you know, in the way that you see like in the Bolshevik Revolution or French Revolution or any of these revolutions where they go around, they start confiscating shit from people like hid stuff, and you know, it got like very, you know, and the people in charge got immensely wealthy. Imagine my shock, right? Give us all your gold and silver. What are you going to do with it? Oh, look, you know, don't worry about it, bros. Don't worry about it. You know, we've got the light of God on our side, bros. You know, all the words of Karl Marx, or the, you know, the spirit of the revolution, or some fucking like bullshit. Just give us all the money, right? We will take care of it. So the prophets and preachers, along with the whole council, took counsel and wished to have all property in common, right? You know, you also find that this kind of stuff, this is one of the problems with sola scriptura. The Bible is a very sort of long and complicated document. And if you take stuff out of context and you just sort of like pick up certain phrases, you can make it say basically whatever the hell you want. And this is sort of one of the reasons why you need the church or a church to sort of have a structure, you know, to stop people from like doing really crazy shit like this. They first issued a proclamation that all those who had copper money should bring it up to the council hall. A different kind of money would be given to them in return. Oh, goody. This is what happened. Next, they came to an agreement and decided that all property should be in common, that everyone should bring up his money, silver and gold, just as each had done the last time. Gee, I wonder where this is going to go. This sounds like a great idea to me. I see absolutely no downsides of this at all. Hang on a second. 81. Feel like I should have made like larger screenshots, but it's cool. We'll just I'll just scroll through the thing. I got it here. Where is it? Here we go. After the prophets and preachers reached this agreement with the council, they had it announced in the preaching that all property should be in common and that one person should have as much as the next. Whether they'd been rich or poor, they should all be equally rich. Where am I? I feel like I've heard this somewhere before, bros. I don't know, right? So they said in the preaching, dear brothers and sisters, now that we're a single folk, brothers and sisters, it's absolutely God's will that we should bring together our money, silver and gold. The one person is to have as much as the next. So everyone should bring his money up to the registry next to the council hall. The council will sit there and receive the money. The preacher continued, it is not appropriate for a Christian to have any money, be it silver or gold. It's unclean for a Christian. Everything that the Christian brothers and sisters have belongs to one person as much to the next. You shall lack nothing, be it food or clothing, house and hearth. What you need, you shall get. God will not let you lack anything. So you see, there is quite a convincing argument that that Marxism, sort of communism, has antecedents, particularly given that Marx was German. So this is only about 300 years sort of before the Communist Manifesto kind of thing. So these ideas be kicking around in the milieu is what I'm saying, right? One thing should just be as common as the next. It belongs to us all. It's mine as much as yours, and yours as much as mine. This is how they convinced the people, so that they, some of them, the idiots, brought their money, silver and gold and all that they had. But in the city of Münster, the idea that the one person was to have as much as the next turned out unfairly. You're kidding. I'm shocked. I am shocked, bros. It sounds so fair, bro. Because not everyone turned in their wealth. I'm shocked. I'm shocked to hear this. There were some people in the city who brought up all their money, silver and gold, and retained nothing at all. Some people brought up a part and also retained something. Some brought up nothing at all. Those who brought up their money, silver and gold, and retained nothing were good Christians and held God's word dear. The others who brought up something and also retained something were still two-faced and had a little doubt. Yet those who became good Christians were still to receive mercy, though they had to pray truthfully to God. The others who retained their money, silver and gold, and brought up nothing at all were forced to be baptized on the Friday. They are Christians by force and are still godless. These people still have to all be stamped out by us. Right, so you see where this is going, right? It's literally it's so fucking USSR tier, this whole thing, right? So they had the folk come up to the marketplace together and they gave a sermon there. John of Leyden said that it was God's will that everyone should bring up his money, silver and gold, which is for our best benefit in case we need it. Okay? It's the people's silver and gold, right? It's God's silver and gold. I just happen to be the servant of God who will administer. Can you see where this is going, right? They preached so fearsomely and imposed such a dire penalty for it that no one dared to retain anything. When they were informed of someone who'd retained his money, silver and gold, they drove him from the community and imposed such a punishment on him, beheading some of them, that when another person thought of it, no one dared retain anything. And then next, they seized the food. The bringing up of money lasted about 2 months, since their preaching and punishments were so fearsome that no one dared to retain anything. They also said in the preaching that anyone who still retained anything should bring it up freely, boldly, and openly. He would still receive mercy. However, after this time, there was no more mercy, and the door to mercy will close. Whoever still had something brought it all up, allowing themselves to be to be convinced. And then basically they appointed 3 deacons in each parish who were to guard the property consisting of produce, grain, and meat, and any sort of foodstuffs that were in the city. These deacons entered all the houses and examined what in the way of food, grain, and meat each person had in the house, and they wrote a list of everything that each person had in his house. These deacons went through the city. Each group went around their parish and were to examine what sort of poor people there were and not let them lack for anything. At first, they did this 2 or 3 times, but this practice was eventually forgotten because they still had provisions enough in the city. Now, I need to point out that by this point, the city was under siege. Okay, so the people who had sort of like left earlier, the men, they left their wives and daughters behind, which turned out to be a very, very, very poor choice, and went off to petition help from the Baron. And the Baron showed up with his army, with a bunch of like Landsknechts, how the fuck you pronounce that, and they laid siege to the city. So by this point, they're basically under siege, and of course they're all like, oh, like it's fine, right? Like God will protect us, we are the chosen, you know, no, all this kind of like stuff, right? It doesn't seem to be working out this way. They had communal meals. They had a house by each city gate. This was a community house. Everyone who was keeping watch outside the gate and working on the walls or in the canal went there to eat. There was a captain in charge, and they kept people under duress. They were preaching this community house in front of the gate every day in the morning before noon. And they had sort of like, you know, community things. But you'll never believe this, bros. Inept management of the food supply. Again, I feel like I've seen this before. The deacons took the meat, bacon, and grain from the monasteries and from all the houses from which they had driven out the burghers, and they also took what was up at the cathedral square and in the vicarages. They provided food with this in front of every gate for as long as it lasted. When it was used up, they began to rummage around in the houses for what they'd listed, and then they began to make people poor. In this way, they ate 10 or 1,200 cows and other cattle in one summer, as well as other meat, butter, cheese, and also stockfish and herring, so that in this way they at first feasted and were open-handed. They would carry entire barrels full of herring up to the walls in front of the gates where they were keeping watch. They wouldn't eat the herring and threw it away. With time, the food began to give out, and then they certainly would have eaten the herring that they at first didn't like. Then everyone who had anything at home had to go there to eat, but they didn't have much at home. They had taken everyone's property from him, and they could not get it back when the hunger began to arrive, as indeed it does. Okay, so let me see. So then stuff starts getting dire, right? They start running out of food, and it starts getting progressively more crazy. So they arranged a supper in front of each gate. They had boiled and broiled meat for the meal and beer for the table. The preachers went among the tables and preached to the folk after their fashion. They asked each person, young or old, whether they really believed that this supper was a real supper, just like the one that Christ had instituted. Presumably they're trying to crack down on people mumbling that, you know, we don't have any food and like everyone's going hungry. So they said yes. Would they also be willing to suffer for the sake of God and everything that would befall them, be it fire or water or the sword? They all said yes. Well, of course they did. And they would gladly suffer what they could for the sake of God. Where could the poor common folk turn? One person was compelled to this and the other not. They beheaded or shot whoever was unwilling to act like the prophets and preachers and like to the others. So they just basically just started struggle sessioning the shit out of people, right? It's like, you know, it'd be like, you know, if the Groypers all had like went insane and had automatic weapons and they're just like, see, Christ is king. They just start randomly shooting people. Like, it's just insane, right? Like totally insane. And if people like, you know, screwed up the doctrine when they were like asked, they got like beaten or chased about. And it starts getting insane. However, this is where it starts getting like really goddamn crazy. Hang on, let me find this page 111. They decided really that they had to have all wives in common. This was a charge that was frequently leveled at the Brothers of the Free Spirit, but it does seem like there was like a lot of that, like, to be perfectly honest, right? John of Leyden, with his bishop, preachers, and the 12 elders, proclaimed the matrimony, saying that it was God's will that they should increase the world, that everyone should have 3 or 4 wives, as many of them as he wanted, but they were to live with the wives in a godly way, as you'll eventually hear. This pleased the one and not the other. Yeah, I bet. There were men and women opposed to this, so that they wouldn't uphold the matrimony, and for this reason, many a person would eventually have to die. It's like this weird sort of like proto-Islam. John of Leyden was actually the first to take another wife, in addition to the first wife that he had taken in Münster. He took more wives that day, so eventually he had 15 wives. So the Hollanders, Frisians, and all the real rebaptizers also took more wives in addition to their first wife. They compelled their first wife to go and fetch them another wife. I bet this was really, really popular. But then again, right, like, you know, everyone would be like just completely terrified by this point, and the food is like running out, and, you know, you could just basically get like cast out. The entire like city's under siege. If they chuck you outside the wall, the landnecks are going to get you. So, you know, what are you going to do, right? At this, the devil had a laugh. Those got their wish, who then had old wives and could now take young wives. This was also supposed to be taken up by the menfolk in the world who were not rebaptizers, who had old wives and could have a young one in addition, since it was godly. These rebaptizers in the city of Münster considered it proper according to their understanding. The leaders like John of Leyden and the preachers and the 12 elders, they'd taken away all the money and had driven away everyone from their property and were residing in their houses and wished to have 10 or 12 wives each to boot. I say that this was certainly the proper baptism for them. They hadn't touched the proper water with which they were baptized. Let everyone be on his guard against using such water for baptism. If the rebaptizers had gotten their way, imagining as they did that they would have taken possession of the whole world and driven out all the lords and princes and every government in the world, they would have corrupted the world just as they did to Münster, and done in many a person just as they did outside and inside Münster. God didn't wish for them to get their way. And the rationality basically is like it's like it's needlessly Chadley. It's just ridiculous, right? The rationale was this: the prophets and the preachers and the 12 elders had a plan. Each man who had a young or old wife who wasn't fruitful, it was God's will that this man should take another wife who was, right. So I don't know, maybe like, you know, they were thinking that they'd be able to like outlast the siege for a long time. They're like, you know, we need more people, we need more Anabaptists. Somebody clearly was like not, you know, thinking like terribly rationally here. If she became fruitful, so you get like a new wife, right? Then if you knock her up, he should have nothing to do with her until she delivered. If the man can't abstain from a woman during the period when the wife is with child, he may take another. If the man then takes another wife who also becomes fruitful, then he should leave her alone too. If afterwards the man can't abstain from womenfolk, he may take yet another, as many women as he wants to have, so that they will increase the world. So the man had to have nothing to do with the women who had conceived, and they always took another one. In this way, they wished to increase the world with the matrimony that they'd established. The matrimony that God had established, they did not wish to uphold. Polygamy takes on a life of its own. You don't say. Oh, we got entropy. Oh, thank you very much. $10 from MK. Merry Christmas. Thank you very much, MK. How you doing, mate? I appreciate that, dude. Yes, you know, like Ko-Fi and entropy. You know, money for Christmas for, you know, all therapy beers. Although honestly, my mental health is better since I stopped covering the news. History has already happened, so I don't have to sort of like live in the like constant tension of like, oh, when's the next like horrible thing gonna happen. Yes, I will. I'm going to be doing history like for a while, bros. There's so much of it, and it causes me like far less stress to cover. So yeah. So polygamy takes on a life of its own. Can you believe it, bros? This is what the rebaptizers wanted at first to have with the taking of wives. They made an ordinance to go along with it, and in this way they wished to live with their wives in a godly way according to their faith. But in the end, they just took wives wherever they could get them. Whether they became fruitful or not, they would have just that many wives. In the end, they took little girls who were not yet old enough for childbearing, as you'll eventually hear. So they slept first with one wife and then with the other, and they did all this with a holy pretense so that it would increase the wealth. So they just started screwing anything that moves, and it just started becoming like a huge eyes wide shut party. Gross. The women were urged to accept polygamy. I bet they were. The prophets, preachers, and the 12 elders had it stated in the preaching: all women folk, virgins, maidens, and widows, all who are marriageable, be they noble or non-noble, spiritual or secular, they should all take husbands. And the wives who have husbands outside the city who fled from us should also take other husbands, since their husbands are godless and have fled from the word of God and aren't our brothers. So, dear brothers and sisters, for so long did you live in heathendom in your marriage, and it was not a real marriage. This is so fucking Jim Jones, like really like proper cult shit like going on here, right? In this way, the preachers had the common folk informed in their preaching that they should take husbands this way. There were some women willing to do this and others not. And of the maidens and the other servant girls, some were willing and some were not. There were some women who remained in the city and had let their husbands take part in the departure, imagining they would come back to the city in 4 days or so. If the burghers of Münster had stayed in the city and guarded it and had taken a look at whom they'd let in, they would certainly have been better. So yeah, let me see what else have we got? It just starts getting worse, as you can imagine. Yes, you're not going to believe this, bros. But the polygamy caused strife. I know I'm shocked. I would have just assumed that everyone would have gotten along with everybody else. But no, it caused strife. Hang on, wait a second. Where's the page 116? Here it is. Yes. Strife among polygamous wives. From now on, they couldn't get along on account of the matrimony, and there was now great ill will in the city among the women. You don't say. Whenever 2 or 3 women were together in one house and had one husband together, there was always criticizing and quarreling among the wives. Who the fuck would want 3 wives? Oh my God. For the first wife always wanted to be next to the husband, and the other wives that the husband had taken in addition to the first wife also wished to be by the husband and keep themselves with him just as the first wife did. So they couldn't get along together. So they never had peace among themselves. And every day some accusation came before the prophets and preachers and the 12 elders. Hence they eventually set to it and took some of the women who were the first wife of the husbands and cut off their heads. Do they just kill them, right? It'll all work itself out, so that the other wives would think of this and be at peace with the other wives or concubines. In this way, they compelled their first wives, whom they'd had for 10 or 20 years and had had children together. Then they lived in ill will like this. With this, the first wives had to keep quiet and dared not speak about it. Otherwise, they were all taken and beheaded. Dude. Oh my God. But it still didn't work. They had to backtrack a little bit. They did allow divorce when things got particularly bad. I think. So they sort of backtracked a little bit. When they came back, they had to call their husbands Lord. It's very, all the old women had to take a guardian, basically. So so there basically weren't any people wandering around. Oh my God, it must have been such crazy scene. This is totally fucking gross, and this is how bad this stuff got. Now that all the women folk in the city of Münster had to take men, eventually it was these small girls, and they too had to take men. These girls were 11, 12, 13 years old. I dare not write how young they were. They were still children and hadn't yet come of age, so they were not yet marriageable. So these girls had to take husbands, even though they were too small, being children still. So the Hollanders and the Frisians, the criminals, and some burghers in the city of Münster took these girls in addition to the first wives that were taken before. These men who had old wives also took some of the girls, and in this way divided them up. When the preachers and the Hollanders and Frisians and all those who had taken the girls did so, they were nonetheless too small for the criminals. The Hollanders and Frisians kept the girls for so long with their evil will that they wrecked all the girls, breaking their bodies down because they were not in fact capable of servicing the men. There was a woman in the city who was a female doctor, and she healed these girls so they became healthy, though some girls died because they were wrecked. Fuck, dude. This woman had 15 of these girls that she made healthy again. The girls also had themselves listed at the council hall so that they would be divorced from their husbands because the Hollanders and Frisians in the city wouldn't relent. Oh, that sounds great. Bloody hell. Oh, mate. So then things start getting even more extreme. It starts getting even more Jim Jonesy, as you can imagine. Let me see, 134. Where is it? So this entire time, like they're sort of like fighting with the people besieging them and stuff. They're trying to like storm the city. They get like pushed back. It's all this thing. But what really interests me is just like the weird sort of psychological stuff that was going on, basically, right? So John Lydon, who was basically the king at this point, had a great revelation, bros, that he would be a king over New Israel and the whole world. This is what makes me wonder about like whether there's a Jewish connection, right? Like did these sort of Frisians and Dutchmen, right? Like who were they? Because they just came into this city. I don't know. In the whole world, there would be no king or lord but John of Leyden, and in the whole world there would be no government but John of Leyden, and whoever the rebaptizers he appointed. So John of Leyden proclaimed the revelation to the common folk, saying that God had revealed to him in this way that he would be a king of the righteous and punish the unrighteous in the world and be next to God. The common folk in the city kept it quiet. I bet they fucking did. As for the revelation, one person believed it and the other not. The leaders in the city of the rebaptizers, the preachers, agreed about this. It was them, the leaders of the rebaptizers, who made John of Leyden a king. The common man in the city didn't make him a king. No, he was chosen by the elite. Imagine my shock. Now God has chosen me as a king over the whole world, but I say to you, dear brothers and sisters, I would much rather be a swineherd and much rather hold the plow or dig ditches than be such a king. Hang out with your 12 wives. What I do, I must do, for God has chosen me for this. Dear brothers and sisters, let us thank God for this. And then they got up and sang a German hymn, To God on high alone be glory. And then they all went home. So then he basically set up like a court, set up like his own sort of like army, replaced all the military commanders of the city, appointed officials. You can see how this is like going. Designed new regalia. I guess they had a lot of time on their hands because they were under siege. But the king and his staff got all the best cloth and stuff like that. The king's livery, gave them rings, and basically began adorning himself in gold. It's funny how that works. The king had also decked himself out. He'd done so little at the time when he'd received the revelation that he was to be king. But with this, they were playing the fool. Now he decked himself out magnificently along with his servants, and he made himself a velvet coat and magnificent stockings, and doublet of magnificent silkwork, and a magnificent golden cap, and a velvet bonnet with a crown, and a sword with a golden sheath, and an armor dagger with a golden sheath, and many golden chains, which he wore around his neck. So he's going for that thug life. The king had a golden chain, and on this chain he had the world hung, just like his coat of arms, with a golden round orb. This was a blue speckled orb, and the stone on top was grey and blue. The stone was mounted all around, being hung around with gold, and on top was a golden cross. So basically he just started like decking himself out. Where is it? He also wore silk cords around his neck, and on these were bent the most beautiful gold that there was in the city, consisting of ducats, rose nobles, angalots, crowns, and gold guilders. So he's literally like a 90s American black rapper. I mean, he's just risen it up. He's covered in drip. what the king had on his horse was also all covered in gold. It's just so it's just socialism, like again, right? Like you may starve, but I have like awesome like gold like stuff. So you know, let's see what else have we got here. Right, sorry. There's the gold. So then he just sort of basically starts LARPing as the king of the world, this guy, right? He had two small youths stand behind him, one on the left hand and the right hand, and he switched places, and this was like meant that like he was like king, and he was like the Old Testament. He had reproclaimed the word of God anew and was going to prevail. That the young man with the sword on the left hand had to go to the right hand, signified that he was to go on punishing all unrighteousness, and had punished it. The king and the preachers imagined that in this way they would take possession of the whole world and would have the upper hand, just as they did in Münster. They carried on this foolishness with the young men with the book and the sword before the common folk, and made the poor people so blind. Some who helped carry out this rule did know better, but for some of the simple people, they didn't know any better and imagined that things were to be so. And of course, everyone was scared, obviously. Then they started like just, repossessing like people's property. Basically, the guests, which were the sort of the Frisians and the Dutch who came in, started taking over the best houses near the gate. This guy, apparently he was a goldsmith who came to Münster at the same time as the rebaptizing. This does sound a bit like Wandering Jay, honestly. I don't know, but wouldn't surprise me. And just to give you an idea of the kind of like crazy shit that was going on, like sort of during this period. At one time, there were two small girls in the city. These girls took it upon themselves to be mute, and the people would also say that they were supposed to be mute. They actually were having an evil spirit upon them. They went up the street during the day and looked for all the men folk who had elegant garters tied around their legs, as was the fashion of the time. When they came upon such men folk, they stood in front of them and pointed with their fingers, giving out a noise just like a person who was mute. If the man was unwilling to have the garters taken off, the girls would get angry and shriek. If the man willingly let the garters be taken off, the girls were quite satisfied, and they jumped up into the air and clapped their hands together and looked into the air with their faces and acted just as a mute person would. The girls also went through the city and looked for women folk who had on elegant neck scarves that were stitched or untrimmed. If the women folk had silk work around their bodices or sleeves, the girls would leap at it and want to have it too. The women were supposed to take it off, and they would jump on the women's necks and pull it off and then take it back apparently and like burn it. Like, dude, like, so eventually, you're gonna be shocked by this, bros. The starvation started getting much worse. The starvation worsens. The hunger became so great in the city, so much so that women and children began to cry for bread. The deacons had no more to give to the folk than a piece of bread that everyone still got occasionally. But so long as they still got a piece of bread, they could quiet all the folk, and for as long as they still had grain, the king had it forbidden that anyone should be so bold as to do his own baking or brewing in his house. The king and the councillors imagined that in case they had something secretly hidden that the deacons hadn't gotten, they would still get it, and had an order given in the preaching that if someone still had meal or grain, they should bring it up and give it to the deacons. For the deacons are to go around the city once more and examine the houses and look in all the nooks and crannies. If the deacons find something that you've hidden away, they'll take it from you and you will be punished for it. Whatever more the deacons get will then be divided among the community. So the deacons went around the city in each parish, and they entered all the houses and examined all the corners. The deacons found much more that the people had secretly hidden away. One had hidden it in the bedding, other had hidden it stuck in the attic, in many secret crannies where someone had hidden something. So they're basically sort of just, finally getting all of the so this is as far as I got into. So eventually it's sort of like realized that they're not going to be able to break out of the siege. They have like 3 days of entertainment. They they sort of gin the people up in the market square a bit like Jim Jones saying, are you ready to die? Like, are you ready to die? But everyone's like starving at this point, and it's starting to look like a bit grim. So then the king has like a sort of like a fainting fit. And it's just more of this like weird kind of so the king has like a bit of a fainting fit. And then now that Nipodolling, who was one of the burgomeisters, saw that the king had fallen from his throne and the spirit was ruling him, the poor people didn't imagine anything other than he was endowed with the Spirit of God, that God was ruling him. Nipodolling ran up to the king and suspended the sanctifying. He grabbed the king around and sat him back on his throne, then blew the spirit into him. Then the king revived and said in a quivering voice, "Dear brothers and sisters, what great joy I see! The city is going around in a circle, and you all look like angels. The one is more beautiful than the other and brighter than the other, so holy are you all." Then they began a shrieking among the women and a shouting of Father up at the marketplace, because the king had received such a revelation. The spirit befell the king once more, but this didn't last long, and he sat down again. In the end, he revived again and said, "Look, dear brothers and sisters, the house is coming forward. The city is still going around in a circle. This means this much, and it's a sign from God that we're still going to march around the world, and that I'm still going to be king over the world and lord over it." So yeah, as you can see, this is starting getting crazy. There's still a fair bit to go on this, actually, including sort of the end of the story, and the sort of bad end that befalls them. So maybe I'll do that next week. Actually, let me see. What can we lens next? Here we go. There's some a group of lands necks. You know, look at those lovely stockings that they all have. The height of fashion. Sonny Jim, who was besieging them, the Spanish, no, actually the Germans, the Baron of Westphalia, not the Baron, the Duke, basically the guy who sort of controlled the sort of like Westphalia. When the Burgomeisters buggered off on the sort of first Friday, they buggered off in order to get help from the Baron or the Duke or whoever it was to bring an army to like kick out all the Anabaptists. But yeah. Let's see who we got in the chat. Thanks for coming, bros. On YouTube, we've got Sunny Jim, Drakenblade 007, Top Rob, Victorian Time Traveler, Uncle Ted's Cabin, Ardent Party. Good to see you all, guys. Anyone else? On Rumble, Teabagging Therapist. I was a bit quiet on Rumble. Total Blackout Painting, Full Short. I hope you're doing all right, Full Shot. And on Odyssey, we had MK and Nariti. Thanks for coming, guys. So yes, I guess I will do part 2 next week. I hope you enjoyed that, bros. Thank you very, very much for the super chats. And remember, if a bunch of Anabaptists show up in your city state and start kicking people out and putting all property in common, don't fall for it. It's going to end badly, right? It's going to end badly. Trust me, bros. Good night, everyone. I'll see you.